John McMullen with us here, hopefully bunkered down at his house. The dog is okay, too, I presume, right? John, how are you, pal?
I'm doing well. The dog, as you can imagine, does not like snow, but I think I hate it more. That's firmly confirmed, actually.
Wait a second. I thought a lot of dogs like snow. The dog. Well, first of all, what's the dog's name? What kind of dog is it? Let's get some important facts out here. If this dog is going to
come on, it's Isabella. It's a Beagle Bulldog. She does like to play in the snow. I'm making that up. She likes the snow. I hate the snow. She doesn't like to go to the bathroom in the snow.
Right. That's usually when the dog takes. No, that's when the dog takes the longest time. You know, dogs generally take a long time to begin with, but when you have to stand out there with them to make sure that they go, that's usually when they choose to take the longest time. So, Johnny Mac, yesterday we had Michael Bennett and Daryl Worley visit. Today, a little quieter, although one topic we brought up yesterday at the corner position, you've got some news about Jalen Watkins, as I thought maybe the Eagles might be able to get him on a deal, but we're in this second part of free agency with the first flurry done, and now teams are looking for bargains, and Jalen Watkins might be one for who?
Well, San Francisco is going to be his first stop, and that's tomorrow on Wednesday, so at least Jalen's a Florida guy anyway, so he probably wouldn't be around, but he can get out of the blizzard. And then he's supposedly got a few visits after that, and we'll see. But generally, when teams get you in their building, they're going to try to close. So there's always the opportunity that if San Francisco sees value, that they could sign him, and he doesn't get to any other potential visits. But Jalen's one of those guys. He was scheduled to be a restricted free agent. The Eagles didn't tender him, which that indicates they didn't want to pay him at that kind of level. So they were looking for a better deal. If they did want to bring him back, it looks like that's probably not going to happen. So it's just another player. I don't want to overstate it. Wasn't going to be a key member of that secondary by any stretch, but has been around for the vast majority of the last 4 years, and he's been a versatile player who can help on special teams.
In that secondary, one of the reasons that Malcolm Jenkins was able to drop down into the slot was because of Cory Graham, but of course he's expected to retire. So there's a lot of moving parts in the secondary that still have to be addressed, correct?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of those guys. I don't think the average fan knows how important Cory Graham was to this defense. And more than making plays, it just had to be with the confidence Jim Schwartz had in him, and the fact that he was a veteran guy. He understood his role. He wasn't going to make assignment mistakes, and that's very big for a coach like Jim Schwartz. He wants to have a comfort level and understand if somebody's going to be in the game, they're not going to freelance, they're not going to try to play hero football, as they call it, and they're going to do what they're asked. Cory did that very well. And that gave him the confidence to put him in the game. And what that meant is he had the ability to move Malcolm Jenkins around, who I've written about. I've called the MVP of that defense last year because of everything he did. He played so many different positions. He played, obviously, his normal strong safety. He played linebacker more than anything else last year. And I don't think people realize that. After Jordan Hicks went down, he played nickel corner. He played in the slot. He played outside cornerback at times when teams would go four wide or something of that nature. It's really amazing how many different hats he wore. And the reason he was able to do that is because Jim Schwartz had the confidence in Cory Graham to put him out there. Before Cory got here, he didn't have that kind of confidence, and he wouldn't use Malcolm in all those different spots. And when you do that, when you use a player and have a player who's that versatile, that creates a lot of headaches for the opposing defense. If the Eagles don't find a third safety, and Cory Graham may retire, he may not, he may still be out there in August. The Eagles might give him a call if they can't find a replacement at that particular time. But if they can't find a replacement that Jim's comfortable in, they're not going to be as versatile on defense.
Of course, they gave up 505 yards and 3 touchdowns in the Super Bowl. And if the Eagles' secondary is a question, John, is that why the moves that they've made along the defensive line are so critical? Because if you're not going to be able to cover them on the back end, maybe you knock the guy down before he can throw the football.
No, I mean, well, yeah, that's a big part of it, and Jim Schwartz talks about that a lot. Is everything obviously on defense goes in concert together. If you don't have a good pass rush on a particular Sunday, your secondary is not going to look very good. At times, on the other hand, your secondary may save the defensive line, but there's no question the strength of this team is up front. And in theory, on paper, it's designed to get to the quarterback quickly, to get him off his spots, and that makes things easier for the secondary. Now, people tend to get very micro about things after individual games. You mentioned the struggles in the Super Bowl. Hey, Tom Brady got hot. And I always talk about the personality of certain games. That doesn't mean the Eagles have a bad defense. They had a bad defense on that day that was picked up by Nick Foles and the offense. Still, the strength of this team over a 16-game sample size and more if you get to the playoffs again is the defense. That's the more talented part of this team, even though there's plenty of playmakers on offense as well.
So, John, free agency, you said we're to the second part. As we've gotten to where we are the Eagles better or worse right now, in a better or worse position, do you think, and why?
Well, I mean, it's still too early. We haven't gotten to the draft. We haven't gotten, as you mentioned, to the second, even third, even fourth levels. I keep reminding people the Eagles added LeGarrette Blount in May last year. I just mentioned Cory Graham. They added him in August. So there's a lot of dominoes that still have to fall. But they've added some good pieces. They've lost some good pieces. They're not as deep after all the losses. But again, that's what the draft is for. That's what the later stages of free agency are for. I will say that, if anything, they got better on the defensive line. I mentioned that yesterday because Michael Bennett and Haloti Ngata are better players, albeit older players, than the guys they replaced, Vinny Curry and Bo Allen. So if you want to look at it at that one aspect, which is the strength of this team, they're actually better.
Is it fair to say that there are more questions on the defensive side of the ball than the offensive side of the ball right now?
No, I mean, there's not a lot of questions on either side, to be honest. And the ones that are there are sort of injury-related, with Carson Wentz, obviously, and will he be ready? But the vast majority of the starters on this team are back. I mean, almost all 22 starters are back. Not Patrick Robinson, so you have to replace him. Not Torrey Smith, but nobody's really all that concerned about replacing him. So, I mean, this is not a team with a lot of questions to begin with, other than building depth. I think you start to go deeper and you start peeling the onion a little bit. And as I said, is Carson going to be the same player? Is Jason Peters going to be able to come back at age 36 after a torn ACL and be the same Jason Peters he was before the injury? Are Michael Bennett and Ngata going to be able to have gas left in the tank? Are they still capable of doing what they've done in the past? I think those are kind of the questions you have. But if you want to relate that to other teams in the NFL, I think everybody else, not everybody, but the vast majority have far more questions than the Eagles do.
We're talking with John McMullen on 97.3 ESPN.com, Eagles and NFL Insider. You can follow him on Twitter at JF McMullen. He's joining us as all guests appear on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. John, you guys were talking about safeties earlier. Some former Eagles safety news. Brian Dawkins announced today that Troy Vincent will be the man introducing him at his Hall of Fame induction. I want to get your thoughts on that.
Well, they've been very close for a very long time. Obviously, they share sort of a similar faith, and they've always done things together. So that's always one of those things. It's always interesting to see who people select and why they do it. And those guys are very close, and they've remained very close. Obviously, Troy has gone on to be a big wig in the NFL, and Brian's still here in Philadelphia, but they've remained very, very close as teammates throughout it all. And I think it shows you how close they were, because a lot of times you'll see players picking family members, maybe even picking their children or things of that nature. But I always like when somebody picks somebody who meant a lot to their career, whether it's a coach or a teammate, because I think, that speaks more to their football story than the personal story, which, sometimes is great as well. But obviously they're being honored for the football part of it.
Troy Vincent also in the news today, as his name was the guy at the front of the news about the catch rule coming under changes. Vincent was saying today to the media that it looks like that they're going to do things such as the only reverse the call on the field when it's indisputable. It looks like going to the ground. He says that's, quote, it looks like that is going to be eliminated. So I want to get, what is your interpretation of what Vincent said about the rule, the catch rule changes?
Well, I think in a lot of ways, and the Eagles were lucky about this in the Super Bowl, is they changed it sort of before. And they kind of said to Al Riberon, who's the head of officiating, to let's go back to what the rule says, and that's indisputable evidence as far as overturning things on video. So you saw the Corey Clement catch, for instance, which had been overturned, similar catches to that in the regular season, where the ball shifted slightly and you didn't regain complete control. Things like that had been overturned. Shouldn't have been, but they were. And I think that was a mistake that the league office recognized was their own, sort of an unforced error, for lack of a better term, and that they created it. They didn't need to. And then the second part is, and I believe Troy used the Des Bryant catch, the Jesse James catch as examples, that when the new rule is implemented, those types of catches will be catches, as I think everyone assumed they should have been. In the NFL, over-legislated, made it more difficult than it needed to be. I applaud this move, at least on paper, but we'll see how it works out in reality, and see how they handle it. Because it really doesn't matter what it says on paper. It matters how they apply it to the game and the game-type situations. And if they do sort of remove what we've seen and as I use those examples with Des Bryant and Jesse James, I think fans by and large, maybe not Green Bay Packer fans in that game or the fan on the losing team, but I think fans as a whole think those types of plays should be receptions.
Gene Steratore, the referee in the Super Bowl, John, I didn't realize that he was an NCAA referee as well. He's multi-talented. I saw him in one of the NCAA games, and of course they had to go to the table for a review because there's review in college basketball as well. But who knew? I think there's two current guys. Bill Vinovich, I think, is the other guy. Is that right?
Yeah, and Gene, it's a tough job. It really is to be an NFL official, because I think for the most part they do a very good job. It's very difficult. And I think the league, I always say to Mike, because this is a pet peeve with Mike, is the officiating. And I always say, you're not angry at the officials, you're angry at the rules. And the league has made it difficult for them with some of the rules they've made and how difficult and how over-legislated, as I said, the game has become. By and large, though, the on-field officials are doing what they're told to do. So when you see that's ticky-tack, whether it's, maybe illegal contact down the field, yeah, I agree with you, and you're angry at the official, but the official's being told to do that. So by and large, they're doing a pretty good job. And I've always told fans, you're pointing your anger in the wrong direction. It should be at Park Avenue. And I hope they sort of understand that at some point. There's been no evidence as far as rules like pass interference and illegal contact, but here we have the catch rule, and they are trying to make a change, and that will, I think, be a good one for the game.
The catch rule, one rule that is being discussed, another rule the 49ers, Chargers, and Cardinals want to be discussed, and they've thrown out there, is they want West Coast teams to experience an NFL rule that'll limit early kickoffs. Do you think this has any legs, John, or are they just wishful thinking?
Well, I think that's more difficult. I understand why they want it, and I actually agree with their mentality. It's always been very difficult and they're called body clock games in the NFL, just from going West Coast back east, and you think about what their body clock is and how early a 1 o'clock East Coast kickoff is for them. So I get the mentality of it, but what the unintended part, and people don't think about there, is the TV, and TV's the golden goose. The vast majority of the $13 billion this league generates comes from its TV revenue, and you got to have windows. You got to have 1 o'clock windows, 4 o'clock windows, Sunday night, Thursday night, Monday night. So you have to feed the beast that's giving you all this money. So it's good to say in practice, but it's very difficult to do because there's only obviously 32 teams, 16 games, a little bit less on bye weeks, and you got to put that puzzle together as a schedule maker. It's not as easy as just saying, okay, you can't play in this time window, because teams have to play in those windows.
Just to put a bow on that, so the proposed rule would say that no team would be scheduled to play more than 3 away games with a scheduled kickoff time prior to 1 o'clock in the time zone of their home stadium, except with their consent. So if you took the 49ers, for example, and they had road games in Green Bay, Minnesota, Kansas City, and Tampa Bay next season, the rule that they would be hoping for would be that one of those games would at least be a 4 o'clock Eastern kickoff, like you said, the body clock issue.
Yeah, and I always say, if you want to ensure that happens, get good. If you're good, you're not going to be playing a lot of 1 o'clock games. You're going to be playing, high-profile games, night games, national television window games, even the 425 games. If you're really good, those are the spots they try to put you in. So don't go 2-14, and you're not going to have a lot of 1 o'clock kickoffs.
John, the reports came out today about the Alliance of American Football set to launch in February 2019. And it's interesting because their shtick they're going with in the press release is that there's all of these Division I football players who are never going to play in the NFL, or at least not going to be picked up by the NFL, and that those are the people they're targeting, and their hope is to find the next Kurt Warner who's bagging groceries as part of their quote. But with the AAFL coming along, with the XFL coming the year after that, is it possible that this is just going to be another failed venture? I know there's a lot of big names attached to, like Bill Polian and Hines Ward, but to me, it doesn't matter how big the names are. To me, at the end of the day, these are businesses and they have to make money. So is there really money to be made in a league that is going on while the NFL is in its off season?
Yeah, I don't think there is. For a couple reasons. I don't think this really in any sport, not just football, but fans tend to only want to pay for the top tier product, and they're not going to support what's essentially a minor league over the long term. Now, if it's a feeder system, if it's a developmental system, as minor league baseball is, and you have teams affiliated with the big ball clubs and it becomes sort of a loss ledger, then it's fine. But if you're trying to do it on your own, as sort of minor league football, as all these organizations have done in the past and in the future. It just doesn't work. It's not going to work. And if you think about one of the reasons pro sports is because few people can play at that level, and even few people who played at the Division I college level will make it in the NFL. We all understand that. And you talk about 53-man rosters, but remember, they blowed up to 90 in the off season. And the last thing a lot of these players want to do, even if they're on the Eagles, even if they're regarded as camp bodies, regarded as unlikely to make the final roster, the last thing they're going to want to do is leave an opportunity to make the Philadelphia Eagles or any other NFL team to go play for a minor league football team. So you're not only talking about, as they said, the players that play in the NFL, but also all those guys are going to be signed to the off-season rosters and given an opportunity throughout OTAs, throughout mini camps, practice squad guys who have to sign future contracts. They're not going to leave that to play in a minor league of football. It's just not going to happen.
Hey, John, how about the fact that they're not even out of the gate yet with an idea of an opposing football league, and now it's the leagues. They're already split. You know, you've got Vince McMahon with an XFL in 2020, but Charlie Ebersol, Vince McMahon and Dick Ebersol were together in the original XFL. Already they've got a split down the line between these two factions.
Well, and Charlie, you're right. And Dick Ebersol and Vince McMahon were partners in the original XFL. And Charlie did the recent 30 for 30 documentary on the XFL for ESPN. It's almost he wanted to beat Vince to the punch to create the minor league football. And I think that's what it's about. It's not about sort of, certainly not competition. He wouldn't even say that, but with the NFL, it's about beating the XFL to the punch, and ultimately it's a race to lose money because they're both going to fail. So it's just no one's going to support minor league football. They're just not.
How are you going to make money, John, in a league that'll have no TV timeouts and 60% fewer commercials? Can you explain that to me?
It's easy. You know what, Pete? It's easy to have no TV timeouts when no advertisers want to pay you to have those TV timeouts.
No kickoffs, they say, no onside kicks. The losing team will start at its own 35-yard line with a 4th and 10. All kinds of innovative rules coming out of this news today. But already, that's the thing that rings the most true to me is, boy, they're trying to start a secondary league, and already there's a split as Vince McMahon wants to start one in 2020, and now Charlie Ebersol wants to beat him to the punch.
Yeah, and then there's also all the gimmicks. And you saw minor league baseball, which I think is the worst gimmick I've ever seen in the history. With trying, putting a runner on second base in extra innings. Everybody's trying to do this to sort of capture this new generation audience that has the so-called short attention span. And if you need to do things like that, maybe you don't want that audience. Maybe you wait till they grow up a little bit. Because the last thing you want to do is change Major League Baseball, professional football. And it seems like everybody's racing to do it.
Well, we always want an audience with John McMullen. He's our guest here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline, our 97.3 ESPN Eagles insider, columnist for the National Football League, covers the National Football League for us as well. You hear him each day here on the Sports Bash at this time. Johnny Mac, stay dry, stay warm, stay bunkered in. We'll catch up with you again tomorrow, pal.
All right, thank you, guys.